In this class, we had a conference call with Duncan from AWB and got a chance to learn about rural infrastructure and governance in Malawi. We spoke about the importance of connecting ministries within government in order to make the best use of resources and effectively address development issues. We also talked about the AWB approach, which is multilateral and works with every level of governance. AWB also works in Ghana, and so after the class, I researched a bit into Ghana's development. The following video takes a look at how Ghana is working to meet the Millennium Development Goals. It provides more insight into the development strategies and gives background to EWB's work there.
It was presented as a true example of the world coming together, the rich West working with the poor South to improve the lives of the so-called bottom billion. The 8 Millennium Development Goals were launched in 2000 as a way of helping governments to leave a people out of poverty, ignorance and disease. By 2015, developing countries in Africa, Asia and Latin America are supposed to have halved poverty, achieved universal primary education, promoted gender equality, reduced child mortality, improved maternal health, combated HIV, AIDS and malaria, ensured environmental sustainability and developed global partnerships. So how are they doing? Well, last month, UN General Assembly marked 2/3 of the way toward 2015. It showed that in Africa, most countries are going to miss those milestones, but some, like Ghana, are on track to meet the deadline. So is the case of the Ghanaians, the Botswanans, the Tunisians and others doing the right thing, and some of those others doing wrong? Is there something more fundamentally wrong with the goals themselves and what they represent? That's what we're discussing this week on Africa Today.
Ghana was the first African country south of the Sahara to gain independence from a colonial power. Despite the fanfare that greeted its 50th birthday 3 years ago, it is still relatively underdeveloped. Recent economic reforms have helped the country to attract investment and develop its infrastructure. But the benefits of these reforms have largely helped the privileged few in society, and the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. But Britain's Overseas Development Institute thinks the country has turned a corner and is on track to meet the targets set under the Millennium Development Goals to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger in 5 years' time. If this is true, then Africa Today asks, what guarantees are in place for the successful achievements of these targets by 2015?
Hello, I'm Henry Bonso and welcome to Africa Today. How does one measure the progress of a continent of so much diversity against 8 general targets dreamt up by policy specialists over 10 years ago? Well, according to the economist Jeffrey Sachs, who advises the UN Secretary General, Africa, the hotspot, is undoubtedly in better shape today than when they were launched. Most of the continent's wars are scaled back or ended. Most of the continent is enjoying economic growth, and for many, at the highest level since independence. The AIDS, TB and malaria pandemics are at least partly in check. Child mortality rates are declining. But is that how Africans see it? As was confirmed at last month's UN General Assembly Summit, most of the continent is likely to miss the goals in 5 years' time. One of those that is on track to meet them is Ghana. Another country that came in for some praise is Liberia. But what lies behind their success and what might they be getting in return? What kind of guarantees? With me in the studio today to discuss this are John Ofei-Ansah, editor of News Africa magazine, and Desmond Davis, editor of African Prospects magazine. John Ofei-Ansah, how did the Ghanaians react to their relatively glowing praise at the UN General Assembly?
Well, naturally, they will be elated.
Yes.
Yeah, but I must say that Ghana has long been a pace setter in many respects in sub-Saharan Africa. We can recall that it was a model of economic reform from the mid-80s to the mid to late 90s.
What made it a model of economic reform? Because some people talk about SAP, structural adjustment programs, and they almost spit those words out. But you think actually that was a good thing?
Well, you see, the SAP itself had its merits and demerits. And I wouldn't write it off, 100%.
Yeah, because it involved things like privatization, reducing the public sector.
Something I'm all for, because to me, in my opinion, I'm not an economist, but from what I know, the business of government is not to engage in business, but to create, to administer, and create the right environment for business to thrive. Right? So I don't see, so if, besides involved privatization and so on and so forth, to me, it was a good thing.
And have we noticed a trend developing then when outsiders, IMF, World Bank, some of these big international organizations say to Ghana, look, you need to do this? The Ghanaians tend to generally say, okay, and they follow it. And that's one of the reasons why the outside organizations, the US, the EU, say Ghana is a model. Again, we've seen it with the Millennium Development Goals.
Well, it's like a servant or a worker, doing whatever the boss wants.
Yes.
You live with your big brother, you are superior to him, you do whatever he wants, so he'll praise you as a good boy, right? But having said that, that trend change, see, what the IMF did was introduce that one-size-fits-all approach, which later on was realized to be wrong, right? So let me move forward. I mean, in the early part of this decade, the Ghana government introduced a growth and poverty reduction strategy.
Yes.
It's a document that was homegrown,
right,
supported by the donor community.
But was it triggered by the Millennium Development Goals? Was the Ghanaian government prodded to do this because there was this big international agreement?
Partly so, and again, to sort of it replaced the previous IMF World Bank programs. Yeah. Right, and this GPRS was also, were enhanced by the Ghana government going HIPIC,
heavily indebted
the poor countries initiative, HIPIC, and again it was also enhanced by multi-donor budget support.
Yeah, but the pattern is fairly clear. I mean, these big international agreements come through. There are goals like the Millennium Development. The Ghanaians don't resist. They say, OK, let's try it and see where it goes. And as a result, they get a pat on the back and things appear to be going quite well. Desmond Davis, your background is Sierra Leonean, but you look across the continent, as does John. Do you think the Ghanaians were right to be delighted at being praised in this way, on track to meet the Millennium Development Goals by 2015? Or are you a bit more sceptical about these goals and what governments do to meet them?
Well, I think with Ghana, really, it doesn't have anything to do with the MDGs. Because since 1981, when Ghana was really at a low ebb, you could see, I've been going there since 1981 when Jerry Rawlings staged his first coup, and you could see the conscious effort over the last 20 or 30 years for Ghanaians to move forward. I think Ghanaians actually have reached where they've reached by their own hard work rather than, okay, outsiders will help, but I think Ghanaians themselves have made it to this stage. Because you see, also the quality of government is very, very important to economic development. And since the country returned to democratic rule in 1992, you've had proper elections and people have had their say, and that's very, very important.
But when it comes to those Millennium Development Goals, we're hearing more scepticism about them now. I want to explore this. Do you think the Ghanaian approach, which is to see them as a monitor almost of internal progress, an external monitor, the Ghanaian response to it has been good, and other African countries should have done the same, or have the Ghanaians been too slavish in trying to pursue them?
No, well, the problem, in fact, with the MDGs is that the permutations are just very, very confusing. I mean, you will read that someone has done this, someone has done that. But for me, the most important thing, these MDGs are basically human rights. I mean, you do not have, you do not need an MDG summit for governments to do what they're supposed to do. Every government, what it's sold, should reduce poverty.
Are you saying that they weren't really necessary then in 2000? I mean, 189 or 188 countries coming together to agree 8 trackers